All right. Good afternoon or morning, depending upon where you're from. I'm Mary Beth Collins, the Director of Programs at the National Association for Children of Addiction, otherwise known as NACoA. And here at NACoA, we are committed to eradicate the impact of the disease of addiction on children and families. And by attending today's webinar, you become an important part of that process. Tools that help caring adults talk to kids and teens about emotions help all youth these days. But for those impacted by addiction, it helps them heal. So thank you for your heart, your attendance today. And now let's have some fun as we talk about this incredible film. Real quick, I'm just going to go over some basic housekeeping and then introduce my wonderful co-presenter. We are going to be using both the Q&A box and the chat, and we've got some polls. So, you're not going to just be sitting back and watching us entertain you. We're going to have you very busy, contributing in a really wonderful way. We want this to be engaging. So please enter questions in the Q&A box, and we're going to try to address them if appropriate while we present. And we do have what we call a Q&O, questions and opinions, at the end. But if we aren't able to address everything, we do plan to provide answers in the email with other information that we're going to send to you afterwards. A lot of what we cover today is also in a discussion guide and those resources, and all that's going to be emailed to you later. So keep an eye on the Q&A. Throw your responses in the chats, and together we're going to have a very fun and a very fast hour, I suspect. So now let me introduce you to my counterpart, Margaret Thompson. She is so wonderful, as well as being such a passionate advocate for children and families, and I just really enjoyed the opportunity to work with her and get this webinar ready for you. Margaret has dedicated her career to the family disease of addiction for over 25 years. She brings a wealth of knowledge, clinical experience, and tried and true group, individual, and family methods to her practice. She believes in possibility over pathology, which led her to create Embrace Family Recovery. Margaret is a certified coach who works with family members to develop healthier strategies to cope with addiction. She has received traditional extensive training and worked with thousands of people affected by substance use disorder at the Hazelton Betty Ford Foundation. As a coach, she brings her long-term active recovery with codependency and food addiction to the table as well. Margaret is a dynamic speaker and a lifelong student. Margaret is also the international best-selling author of Voices of the 21st Century, Women Empowered Through Passion and Purpose. She aims to create a world where adequate resources are available to help the loved ones affected by the family disease of addiction learn and heal. So welcome, Margaret, and I'm happy to have you with us today.
Thank you, Mary Beth. It's wonderful to be with everybody.
All right, everyone. So we're going to start. We're going to get you in the action right from the beginning. I'm going to release a poll, and we just want to get a sense, first of all, how many people have, excuse me, one quick section. Where are the... We had a few issues. I actually had checked these polls. We're having problems with the polls, Margaret. I had checked them, but they're not here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to read to you the polls, and we'll have you put the answers in the chat. So the first question is, have you seen Inside Out 1 and Inside Out 2? So let us know which one, if you saw it, or just put both if you've had a chance to see both. We just want to kind of get a sense of if people have seen one or both. Do we have a number of people who haven't had a chance to see the movies at all? Please feel free to go ahead and put that in the chat.
So it's all coming in. We've got a lot of people who've seen one, a few who've seen none, and now some who've seen both. So a fair number have had exposure at least to one or both of them. For everyone's information, if you are interested in watching them, they are streamable now. They launched streamable. They added episode 2 to certain streaming channels on the 20th.
Well, I thought that was Disney was so nice to support our webinar and do it the weekend before we're showing. And honestly, I rewatched one about 3 weeks ago. And now that two is available to stream, I think I'm going to build that into my weekend because it's just so fun. It'll be good to be able to watch it again. For
Agreed.
those of you that haven't been able to see it, we're going to try to explain things in a way you might not understand some of the movie references, but I think for the most part, it's not going to rob you of anything today. But then when you revisit the information after you've had a chance to see the movies, I think you're going to understand in a whole new way why we're doing what we're doing with this, with these movies. The second poll question, sorry again for not having it, was which character do you most identify with? And let us know if there was one character that really spoke to you, put the name in the chat. If there's a number of them, I know on my list, I've got about 5 or 6 of them myself. So go ahead and let us know which are the ones that, and you don't have to just be limited to the emotions or the key family. It can be Bing Bong, or it can be, some of those other really great characters that were in either movie, or like Bing Bong was both. Bing Bong was a trip.
I love some of the comments. We're talking about different emotions, but some are saying they've transitioned. One was more sad, and now it's more joy. A lot of joy and anxiety, which I can relate to. Disgust made the list. Yeah, they're all so good, and they make it so relatable.
Disgust brings a lot of my teenage years back.
Benicia shares that anxiety was pretty spot on, and how fear expressed that they were suppressed emotions. I agree. I had that same reaction, Benicia.
We're going to get a little bit deeper into that very, very soon. So
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
And while we keep moving on, please keep adding to the chat, engage with each other. That's part of the wonderful part of doing these webinars.
Now, the next one, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but if you can put in the chat what concerns in the community right now are of heightened concern for you. We have to look at what is the world, what is the community that our kids are living in that help fuel and have that opportunity to impact the emotions that they're feeling, the family is feeling. And so I just wanted to take a moment to speak to that a little bit. We do have, we're still recovering from the pandemic. There's a lot, the political climate, of course, is always in flux these days. We've got economic issues. We've got the children's mental health crisis. We've got issues in the schools. Social media use is definitely one. In fact, there's a few studies that make a direct correlation from the amount of time that our teenagers are on social media to a negative impact on their well-being. And Yale actually made a direct correlation in a study that they released earlier this year. The mental health and addiction piece, of course, is really, really important. Alcohol is still the number one drug. But when you start to look at some of the studies, and since I'll share some of these in the email that I send you out later, if you want to take a look at some of the stats of the current climate. But when you start to look at the alcohol usage, it is very, very concerning. And the current stat for our children is 1 in 8 children self-disclosed are living in homes that are impacted by addiction. So because it's self-disclosed, it does make you question who isn't disclosing. So there's an awful lot right now that are part of what is swirling around our homes and our families, living and breathing in schools, with the families, with the different things that are happening in the community. And as we know, that a lot of that stuff is not stuff that we control, but we can control the things that we are focusing on, which is ourselves, our children, our families. And that's part of what makes this so powerful for us today. So today we're going to focus on some basic things. looking at the core emotions depicted through the film. We're going to acquire some basic practical knowledge about how you use those characters and explore emotions. They do such a beautiful job in both of the films. We're going to explore how to navigate respectful and supportive conversations with kids and teens after watching the film with them, and learn strategies for improving overall emotional awareness and self-regulation. So why use these movies in order to be able to do it? And, Disney just creates a beautiful, beautiful landscape. Anyway, how many times families want to sit down and watch all of their movies? They've got wonderful fantasy, beautiful storytellers. The characters are fun, they're colorful, they're playful, they're relatable. And children of all ages, as we say at NACoA, everybody in the audience watching the films can relate to it in some way, which means they're able to glean something from it. And that is a rarity, given is such a vast population, such a diverse population, yet a film like this is able to bring everybody together. The children and teens watching a film like this, where it's characters feeling the emotions, they're opening up and identifying, and they're not even realizing it. So that's a very unique scenario, because there aren't that many family-friendly films out there that allow that opportunity. We're going to spotlight that everyone navigates life through the same, what they call in the film, an emotional control panel. And for those that have watched it, they were some of my favorite scenes, where you had all the individual emotions around the control panel, and they were making decisions and doing things for the person that they were in charge of. And then, that opportunity to explore and better understand the emotions, going through this process, it's the reflection, it's what you do after the experience that really gives you an opportunity for better understanding. So what we're going to do, we wish we could do, this would be a webinar in itself to sit and focus on every single one, but we're going to just focus on a few of the key characters and just kind of talk about what the power is of how they were represented. I loved the color combinations. The colors that were chosen for each of these emotions was so spot on. And of course, joy, larger than life, happy, bright, shiny, energy, exuded energy. You might not have noticed, she was the only character that glowed, and she didn't have a shadow. And that says a lot about how we feel, how we beam when we're filled with joy. And they did such a wonderful job of personifying her joy, her happiness, but her positivity as well. Her optimism exuded in her attitude. And it's how she, without really recognizing it, was a take charge. I want everybody to be happy all the time. I'm going to go in, I'm going to prevent anything from destroying happiness. And we saw her do it, right? Even at the expense of all of the other emotions. She wasn't concerned about the other emotions, especially in film one. She was concerned about joy. And she really had tunnel vision about it. And what the film really demonstrated was joy all the time doesn't solve all the problems. And you saw it with obstacles that Joy experienced. You saw it with obstacles that Riley experienced. They tried to dismiss other emotions that they didn't want to give attention to, and it didn't work. Especially, and we're going to transition and talk about sadness in a minute, but especially with a more demure emotion like sadness. The movie did a wonderful job of showing that partnership actually provided a lot of empowerment and power to both Joy and Riley. They were better capable of being able to resolve issues. And I really loved how with Riley, it showed that by having enough strength to admit that she was sad, she was actually able to speak to others about it and discover that she wasn't alone. And that partnership is what made that possible with joy and sadness. And it spilled over then with Riley and sadness. And so with Margaret, I'm going to allow you to then go ahead and, hold on a second, and focus a little bit more time and attention on sadness.
Sure. And I'm going to be brief on sadness because anxiety was very much mentioned. So we're going to just say that as a mental health provider, this movie enlightened me. If it enlightens me and offers me an inside window to me, can you imagine what it does to someone who's not had trainings that I've had? And I think that that's one of the things, not to mention just the sheer joy of this experience of sitting through these movies and experiencing the characters and the fun, was recognizing what I didn't necessarily have words for and abilities to identify in myself. Because I don't know about the rest of you. I can do a good job of assisting someone in figuring out their own feeling, but mine some still elude me. So sadness for me was one of those characters that I really struggled with. And so it was kind of interesting to pick her to talk about what I think was masterful in Inside Out 1, and it evolved into Inside Out 2, was how joy and sadness aligned and worked together and had purposes for each other. The reality with joy is if we chase joy as a permanent state of being, it's chasing an unattainable, ever-moving target. Just as sadness has a role and all of the other emotions have a role, joy has a role. And I think one of the things that this movie did in 1 was evolve sadness's role. And when 2 came along, out pops anxiety. And anxiety turned that whole room orange and showed up saying, where do I fit? How do I do? And I can do this, I can do this. And I mean, the rapid speech, the energy, the characters that she created, that they created through her, hit so beautifully. I absolutely, as a human being, identify with anxiety. And I did so in such a non-threatening way through this movie. And I loved how we were able to go into that part of our experience and recognize that even in this second version where anxiety took over, and I won't spoil it, but you'll see how it evolves to a point where anxiety can no longer even be in charge either. And so again, the masterfulness of these movies is showing us that balance is our goal. Contentment is our goal. And how do we achieve that? And how do we use the resources that each of these emotions provide to us? And it's such a great launching pad for discussions, conversations, sharing within our family systems and in our workplaces with our clients if we're serving the children, whether it be in school. So the alliance between the different characters, yes, and there was someone commented, Brittany, the alliance between sadness and embarrassment was heartwarming, and also just the way they got little jobs done through this movie, and how they learned so much about themselves, each other, and you learned about how we as humans can understand these parts of us and embrace them and work with them.
And I'll just add a little bit to that part of anxiety. What I thought was so astute was we might not have been happy with anxiety, but anxiety was not featured as a villain. The way that anxiety is featured was a character we could understand what was going on, was not featured as a villain, was respected just like all of the other emotions. And actually, I thought it masterfully depicted what actually happens as anxiety amps up. And what was so powerful was when it was obvious that anxiety no longer had control of the emotion. For myself, that was a huge identifiable moment, because that is what anxiety feels like for so many, is all of a sudden you are so whipped up into a frenzy, you can't think. Anxiety is definitely in charge, if anybody can be in charge. And in this particular film, we saw that anxiety actually could step out and nobody was in charge. It was just all of that nervous energy just whipped up into such a frenzy entirely on its own. And they showed that working together, the emotions could bring that down and de-escalate it and have a really good working supportive relationship with one another. And I think that's ultimately what we're all attempting to accomplish. That's what's necessary to have wellness, to have a healthy emotional well-being. And I thought they did it in such a beautiful way in a Disney film. But we wanted to spend a moment talking about that emotional dominance. So in the film, and for Riley, it was anxiety. But that isn't the emotion that takes charge in everyone. For some, it can be anger. For some, it can be depression. For some, it may be joy. And so we just thought we'd ask, put in the chat the emotion that you may witness from time to time taking over your emotional control panel? Which one runs the risk of dominating everything else when you're stressed, when you're overwhelmed? Which one? And I suspected anxiety. We saw a lot of those answers in the beginning. Yeah, frustration. For some, it's depression. For some, it's anger. People who have a hair trigger and, they're getting angry about everything. And you see this a lot today. You see it a lot on social media. Some people are so quick to be angry. Sometimes it's anxiety provoking. Yep, the sadness. I agree with the sadness and depression. Fear. I appreciate those that are volunteering fear. And especially for children who are impacted by addiction in the family, that is an emotion that can be quite dominant. Everything is motivated by fear. They are afraid of what they do. They're afraid of what they don't do. And I think understanding who of the emotions might take charge helps us learn about ourselves when we start to see that happening. But you have to develop those skills. So again, getting to understand your emotional framework is so powerful. And by doing so, you can start to see when you need to start bringing in support for yourself or for your children by these emotions that might start to appear with more and more frequency.
Thank you, Piper, for the ennui. She needed a moment, didn't she? I would just also add that there is a magnificently portrayed moment where fear and anxiety are described beautifully for discerning between the two. And obviously, what we do know is our front feeling is usually our strength or what we lean to, but it's not necessarily the feeling underneath that is really going on. So another great learning moment and speaking moment. So this movie is powerful because it is for anybody, age, gender. It's every part of us are welcome to be in there and receive something from it. It is inviting, bright, colorful. There are things that will be identifiable in that are tough for some of us, but it's done in a way that we can get to it and come back from it. It's not something that opens you up and leaves you open. It offers you some great transitions through your own emotions in this movie. It shows the balance of emotions, the way they work together, the way they help each other, the way that control panel is assumed control by different people at different time. And it leaves it in a humorous way. I find myself smiling so much when I watch these movies for all of those reasons. The first one is transitioning for a geographical move with the family. The second one is transitioning through childhood into puberty and also major stepping stones with peer groups and academically going from middle school to high school. And so it really offers a little bit of what any one of us might have gone through in our childhood or our children are facing in their experience. It allowed me, and I think any one of you who are open to it, to tap into that inner child. I was not a child who knew how to play well. And I was not a child who took everything seriously, still can at times. So whenever I get the chance to tap into that inner child and feel in a safe, enjoyable way some of those joyful, gleeful, pleasant emotions and learn something at the same time, it's a win for me. So one of the things both Mary Beth and I love about this movie, and it leans into my philosophy of possibility over pathology. They mirror that every person in the family has these emotional control panels and these feelings. And so they do a beautiful job of showing the same characters with nuances. Like for mom, it's the glasses and the hair, dad's, it's the mustache, Riley. But in the scene, when they're around the dinner table, they're all sitting there and their own panels are doing what they do with whichever character leads in each one of them. And they didn't necessarily mirror the face that they were expressing at the table. Mom's did, but dad's and Riley's didn't as much. So take a moment to look at that and recognize, two things about that. All humans do it. All humans have these feelings. How we manage them, how we care for ourselves around them, that is key. But the other thing is, and we know this in the family disease of addiction, mask wearing is a scientific, it's like we know how to do it better than anybody. And we don't try to, it's a coping skill. And so this piece of mask wearing can be talked about too, that it's okay to show our true self in different places. And we understand why that might be a skill people use as a coping mechanism. Why is this a great discussion guide? I am a believer in balance. I'm a believer in me as an adult around whatever young people are in my periphery to offer them what I can from my experience, because they're getting a flood of information from all different locations, social medias, peers, schools, everywhere else, churches, and anywhere. Those things are key. What I love about this movie is it's a great discussion guide. It offers us a place where we can let down our defenses. It can be a little more playful. We can keep it simple in the way of using the characters. It's imaginary, it's creative. People can share as a result of that without necessarily going too deep into their own emotional struggle at the time. There's a way for us to connect with one another about what we have gone through as adults in our life and what they're going through, and that some of those similarities exist, and how they may ask questions about how I navigated, and I get to share that as well as encourage them to share what they do to cope with their emotional well-being. When we think about having any kind of conversation around anything, but especially if you want to use this movie as your launch pad, pick the timing wisely. Some of us are not night owls. Some of us are not morning people. There's lots of stressors in our life. Remember that great acronym we learn in recovery, HELT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. No human being is at their best when one of those four is in charge. So try to make sure you have rest and you have the opportunity to fulfill those. When you establish a time to chat, put the phones away, put them out of the room. Let it be a focal point that we get to be present with one another. One of the things I know in my experience raising children who are now grown women, sitting next to each other went much better than sitting across from each other. I feel is our number one friend. Learn how to use I feel with an emotion word. Many of us say, I feel you should, or I feel that when. And so try to remember those beautiful characters and the emotions they represent and tap one of those in. And it may be, I felt like embarrassment when this happened. Ask open-ended questions rather than yes or no's. Keep it simple, sweetheart. Do not interrogate. Do not ask too many questions. And I'm sharing this because I've made this mistake so many times raising my children, where I had pressure inside of me to try and accomplish something with them. And it was boom, 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 boom. My kids thankfully have said to me, hey, Mom, time out. Just listen, please. And that's important for them to be able to do that with me so that I can be present to them and not force my agenda. Whenever we can, with our youngsters, let them lead. So let them help establish ground rules with you. I'm sure some of you who are in the chat do this in your centers, in your schools. Let them lead the dialogue. Stay curious, stay open. Their terminology changes all the time. My daughter wrote FOMO in a text, and my husband's like, what's FOMO? And so it's important to be able to let them teach us about current language and vernacular. Inquire about their experiences, and if they want to ask you about your experiences, share them with them. Helps us connect and realize that we all are on a journey. Listen without responding in our heads. So great active listening skill. Trust you'll have the answer rather than trying to predict what I have to say while they're still speaking, and be actively listening. If your young one is unwilling to open up, one of the tips that was given to me by a professional many years ago was, she was a very open person, but knew her children would not speak to her about everything, despite her coolness for the other kids in her community for the work she did. And she said, I have worked out and identified an adult for each of my children that is trusted by me, that I know has similar values than me, who is their go-to person, who will not violate their confidence unless I need to know due to needing safety resources or further care. And that is a really great way to help our kids know that it takes a village, we are a community, and have identified safe people to go to. Always, always have the option to pass. So one of the things we were going to do is set the scene, but I know with time, I'm going to make this really brief. But if you want to look at setting the scene around the movie, I'd encourage you to really focus it on the child you're going to do it with or children you're going to do it with. Make the favorite food, offer the snacks, go shopping for them, set a date, not a pressure time, but a relaxed time, and watch the movie, right? Sitting next to each other, lounging in the recliner, laying on cushions on the floor, make it a sleepover, whatever fits your youngster. And then when the conversations are starting, I always encourage adults to lead with your underbelly. Rather than ask them to be vulnerable and share, you share a little bit. So for me, I went and my daughter, when this launched, my 24-year-old took me to see it. I happened to be with her at that time. And we walked into the theater and we watched it. And I looked at her and she looked at me and I had joyful tears and just the experience of being with her. And I said, "What'd you think?" "Well," I said, "I had a lot of feelings through that movie. How about you?" "Yep, I did. I had feelings." I said, "You know who drove me a little nuts? Anxiety. I really wanted to banish her." And she said, "You know what, Mom? She has a job to do. You can't banish her." And I was like, oh, those moments of letting them speak and letting them share. So keeping it open-ended, leading with, "Oh, I found this hard in the movie," or "That took me back to when I was a teenager and I remember this now and I hadn't thought of it in a long time. What did you think of when you saw it?" So make it an experience where it's just as comfortable flowing as possible with an environment of a willingness on our parts as the adults to be human and vulnerable. If we have a tear of joy or a tear of sadness, we could share it, but we also can invite them to share along with us. Discussion prompts. So you will get these resources at the end of this experience. And there are lots of potential discussion points and prompts. So we're not going to go through them all. You don't need me to read them to you. But I want to just say that these discussion points are options. We encourage you to please use your own discretion. You know your youngster as well as anybody, and you know age appropriate, whether the movie is age appropriate for them, what language needs to be modified. And this is not as an interrogation, but like we started here, who is your favorite character? Why did you like them? How did you act when you felt? How do you act when you feel that emotion? And if they say, "Well, how do you think I act?" Share, but also share how you act when you feel that emotion. Bring it back to you as well. There are so many aspects to pick from in these discussion prompts that going through them and trying to pick them is hard. But, when you look at joy and anxiety fighting for the control panel, which you will witness in the movie, that's a great lead for, what? When you think about your control panel, who's in charge most of the time? Have you ever experienced that fight or struggle in your control panel? When you think about the emotions that you use on a daily basis, which one shows up first? I think the other one that I want to just touch on is when there have been big changes, right? When there have been big life events or challenges, what feelings did you feel when they were going on? And what emotion or strategy did you use to get through them? Speak to their strengths. Speak to their resources, the resilience they have, the things that I always say this with the family disease of addiction, we wouldn't wish this on anyone. It is so painful and difficult for each and every one of us at different stages in the journey. And some of the most resilient, talented human beings are impacted by this disease. And so even though we wouldn't want to gain resilience through this, we are incredibly resilient human beings. And we want to acknowledge those resiliencies when we see them. Strong emotions, right? Those can be overwhelming, as we talked about with anxiety. When she spins out, it's a lot, and we're not able to function at our best. We are surviving, and many of us know how to survive well. We want to thrive. We want to find ways to do differently. And so really acknowledging when you feel a strong emotion, what do you do with it? Who do you talk to? Can you identify the safe adult that you choose to go to, or peer group, or what it is for you? So really pinpointing the strengths as well as the struggles. These are to be creative. It's a game. Have fun with it and conversate how it feels right in your life.
And then specifically for our older kids, our preteens and teens, they're starting to explore more complex emotions. You definitely saw that in Inside Out too, where they took those, rudimentary emotions and stuck them in a jar and kicked them out of the room and said, yeah, we don't need you anymore. But, that is just the beginning, even for what happens when they start to mix or blend or layer. And that's what this chart is so powerful for, especially with children that might not be allowed to talk about emotions at all. They're still getting familiar with how do I feel when I'm sad? What do you call that when I'm all pent up or really anxious? But when they start to combine or intensify, having a chart like this, I mean, I was even looking it over and some of it, I'm like, I guess I can kind of see that. But it really allows us to see when joy is intensified, what does that ecstasy feel like? Or when anger is intensified, that rage. But what I think is so beautiful here is it does respect that some of those emotions that we might not feel as comfortable experiencing, like anger or fear, when they combine or layer with something like joy, you get some really wonderful emotions. You get that zeal or enthusiasm with anger and joy, or you get that excitement mixed with a little bit of pensiveness when fear and joy are mixed. And so this generates an awful lot of discussion um, right on the onset after watching the movie, but it's something that you can continue to go back and allow your children to become a little bit more experienced and a little bit more well versed in being able to speak about emotions. And you are also getting this, all of these really great resources we've got prepared for you. Um, can't say it enough, can't be overstated. Anytime you have a discussion after any movie with your children, that's a win. I mean, those are the gifts. But when it's after a movie like this, it's even more powerful. So we've got a few, good tips here. I think the most important are number one, not bringing expectations to the table and just appreciating what is rather than demanding what it's going to be, and respecting the fact that on any given point, the outcomes can vary. One of the most important things always is that children need to know that you care before they care about what you know. And so you can't say it enough that you care about these kids, whether you're a parent or you're a caring adult for someone else, and that you're willing to be open about all of your feelings. You can demonstrate it. You don't always have to say it, but reiterating it is so powerful. And these kids are going to teach you just about as much as you may teach them, sometimes even more. So stay curious, stay teachable, be a role model to feed them the language of talking about emotions, which may be new to them or at a higher level than they're used to. You're going to be able to help them find the courage and be brave in order to be able to say how they're feeling in a way that they might not have been able to do before. So modeling is such a powerful part of the role in having these conversations. The way you do it is going to demonstrate that all emotions deserve to be respected, and always responding in a very positive, strength-based way when, the kids are sharing emotions with you. There are no right or wrong answers here. And also not having an ability to answer. You have the right, kids have a right. You may not have an answer right away. And so you can say, you know what, I think I'm going to have to think about that. But the kids may as well. And it may be that next morning over cereal, they might have an awful lot more to say about it because they gave it some thought. You never know when they're going to come back to you. So, just acknowledge, we might need to think about it a little bit more. for adults, especially if you are more of a controlling type, you might want to dive in when you are responding to something that doesn't feel quite comfortable for you. And this is a time you're going to need to fight that urge. This is not the time that you try to control, to fix, to manage. It's the exploration of emotions. That's the win. So just allow the emotions to be. There's a lot of freedom and a lot of power, and that's really what we're after here. And again, it's that flexibility. Conversations can wander, might not know, might go steer off of the movie, but it might go into another area that you might never have had an opportunity to have a conversation. The emotions might bring up other things that they want to discuss with you. Wherever it goes, it's going to be a wonderful journey. So allow the conversation to be in charge.
Can I
But
just
at the
add, Mary? Can I just add,
oh,
Mary Beth? I
yeah,
want to just also, as the adults in the room of those situations, whoop, I'll mute. Go ahead. The dogs are barking.
okay. Well, what I was about to say, and then we'll get back to Margaret, was when we're dealing with families that are impacted by addiction, there are three rules that are unspoken but strongly obeyed. Don't talk, don't trust, and don't feel. And as you can well imagine, having these kinds of conversations, we are breaking every single one of them. We are asking them to feel. We are asking them to talk about it. And the more that they talk and they see that they're respected and they discover that it's a safe experience, they are going to trust more. And by breaking these rules, that is where we bring healing to these kids. It's where they discover hope and they're not alone and that they have caring people that are on their side. So much incredible healing takes place by conversations just like this in regard to this movie. Now, Illuna, and if you're not familiar with them, explore them. They offer wonderful programs. They are extremely child focused, and they have a lot of wonderful resources, and they provide education support camps for kids. And this was created for conversations just like this. And so it's a real nice, it's a simple worksheet, but it really starts to lay out some groundwork for some really important fundamental discussion and identification of emotions. So you can see, you write down, what does it feel like for you? What does it sound like? You know, am I crying? Am I screaming? Am I sad and whispering? Am I not saying anything at all? And then taking that and applying it and saying, when did I feel that way? And connecting it with a memory. You know, those connections with the memories was a big part in the movie. I loved the balls with all the different colors. And they're inviting basically you to be able to do it with your own memories. So this is a wonderful worksheet to fill out while you're watching the film, or to have some time and just kind of think about it and fill it in, or sit down with your child and complete it together.
So what I wanted to add before I dive into some of these, which some are very new to you, is that are familiar too, that with feelings and with this territory, give yourself grace as the human adults that you are. Kids have big feelings. We have big feelings, but we learn to contain them. And so being able to accept that we are going to need grace and kindness to ourselves, that we may completely misread our kids' feelings, but it will be so great to have the conversation where we learn. And we may not know how to identify our own feelings at certain times, and that's okay. That shows them that we are all learning about ourselves, that it is not perfect. It can be messy, but the fact that we're still communicating and having these conversations helps. Let them know it's okay. So self-regulation, right? We're talking about a lot of things that bring up emotions. The movie is going to bring up a variety of emotions. Just going to show you a few because I have them handy. These are wonderful fidget toys because they are quiet. They're massaging our finger. We can roll them when we have them on our hand. There are so many, all available to us. The fidget ones that are quiet can be more helpful for those who have to worry about noises. Validations through affirmations. Sensory stickers not only give us great messages of how to breathe and do different things, but also have a touch piece to them, which a lot of sensory stuff can be very soothing and grounding. Journaling. We've heard about journaling. There are apps to journal. There are different types of journals. One of my favorite to tap into is gratitude journals, glimmer journals, if you like, teaching youngsters to start looking out for glimmers and gratitudes in their day, even if it's one a day, can scientifically be shown to change the brain chemistry. We're going to move on to a few others, but before we do that, we're going to invite you, because you all have great wealth of experience and knowledge. Put in your chat some of your favorite emotional self-regulation tools that you teach your youngsters to use, that are part of your work and parenting or partnering. And then we'll dive into a few others. Breathing. So that brings us to this perfect timing. Thank you, Bernicia. No, it wasn't Bernicia. Laurie. So here is this little, very cool sensory feeling as well, but it's this little, I call her my Yodi, but she is a little figurine that the colors change, teach us how to breathe in this fashion, to slow down. So you follow the light and it teaches you ways to breathe in, hold, and breathe out. So this is a fun little gadget to help with breathing, especially if you're trying to teach people. So we got being outside, journaling, yes, art, that's a big one. So one of the things is sour candy. Blowing bubbles, yes. Sour candy. So sour candy, toxic waste, is one of the ones that my kids used to love. You put it in your mouth, and what happens is it takes us from being out in those places that we see in the brain in the movie, where you're out flooded with whatever feelings. We have all of these, we're going to have all of these in follow-up emails for you to be able to locate and find, but just so you know, that was from Amazon. The toxic waste, when you put it on your tongue, it is so sour that it brings you to the here and now, which is a beautiful way to help with regulation. Now, obviously, sugar and too many is not great, but if somebody has a few in their purse and they're just feeling highly anxious and revved up, can be a tool that can help you. And my last one I want to share on this one is my favorite. We went through some struggles in our family, as all families do. And somewhere along the line, we learned to use ice cubes. So if you have a tarmac driveway or a concrete wall, you take a bunch of ice cubes with you, and you either put them in a big garbage bag and you hit the wall with them, or you throw them at the wall. It sounds like you're breaking china or glass. No one gets hurt, doesn't hurt your property, doesn't hurt the kitchen glass or dining plates, but it gives you a physical release and an emotional release. And my children have at times said, "Hey, Mom, where's the ice?" And we just go outside, no questions asked, and we give an opportunity to release some of the energy. But also, if they do want to cry or talk while we do it, we do it. And I've also just gone and got ice and done it myself when I've needed to. So they can be great tools to use to get creative. And there's lots in the chat. Love that you have those ideas. Yes, grief work with ice is huge. This is another one. And you find the sensory stickers that they make have this 5 things we can do. It's a nice one to use with the hand, because we can use the hand as a reminder. So basically what you do is take the time where your brain is racing and it's out there with anxiety, or it's really struggling with being in the moment because we're heavy with sadness. And we go through 5 things we can see, 4 things we can touch, 3 things I can hear, 2 things I can smell, and 1 thing I can taste. And this can be one that you do with your groups, because you can have people offer different examples. They can be one of them given by everybody, but it again brings us to the moment, brings us to the here and now. All of those are helping us in our regulation. This is a visual that one of my colleagues, and gosh, if I could remember who, I would shout them out, gave me. But the whole idea is this is a nice visual to help us recognize what's going on. So this is your brain, not your brain on drugs, like we heard when we were growing up of a certain age. This is your brain. And so when we're in a stance of health, wellness, not activated, we look like this. When we are triggered, the fingers go up. And what we're left with is the frontal cortex, where we have our executive functioning, our impulse control, goes up, and we are in survival mode. We are doing our basic survival instincts, flight, fright, freeze, fawn, all of those, hypervigilance, and so forth. So these self-regulation tools are working within ourselves and with us to bring the frontal cortex back online. We also know developmentally that's not fully formed till 27. So it may not be the same type of regulation we as adults experience, but the whole point of it is if we can show ourselves and our youngsters and each other, okay, wow, this is going on for me. What tools work to help me start feeling a little less like I'm basically surviving? It's putting words to it.
Okay, so we're going to go back. You'll see this worksheet again from Luna with a little bit of modification from us. Is an entirely different exercise. So you can sit down. The whole point with this worksheet is to help children start to think about, how do I manage these different emotions? What do I do once I've identified them? So, talk about sadness. What does it feel like? But then when I identify that I'm sad, what are some things that I'm going to want to do? You do this at a time where they're in a good space, where they're feeling good, and they can jot down a number of ideas and then keep it someplace that it's easy for them to access. Because as we've seen, and we've talked about a couple times, when that dominant emotion takes charge, anxiety, fear, anger, they're not going to have recall. They're not going to be able to remember, oh, wait, I'm angry. I'm supposed to go for a walk in the woods. They actually need to develop that automatic pilot response, and that takes time. So this prompts them when they're working on changing that behavior. It's also a wonderful idea to have them take a picture of it. So wherever they are, when they decide, oh, I need help, realize I'm afraid, and they can pull it up and they can remember, oh yeah, when I'm afraid, I'm going to play some soothing music. And boy, that makes a huge difference. For my son, the big one for us was he would have panic attacks. And we discovered essential oils with lavender was amazing. We stopped having to worry about going to the hospital because it was so powerful. And he got into the habit very, very quickly. I would smell the lavender and I knew my son was okay. Things were going well. Ultimately, it's balance that we're searching for. And so you can see here, some of these things we've talked about, the social media, sleep patterns have an impact on emotion, sugar intake, exercise, having the ability to reach out to a safe adult. All of these aspects in balance help keep us grounded. And ultimately, that's the goal, because balance is at the heart of well-being. So when we're talking about emotional wellness, it isn't just identifying the emotions, it's being able to experience them, but it's through that process of experiencing them, we learn how to manage them when we're in a difficult time, when we have a challenge, when we're stressed. That ability to respond to those challenges and maintain our status quo, maintain a centeredness, that's what's called resilience. You may have heard that word, that might be new to you, but that's the ability to be in a strong, centered emotional state, to be able to manage the variety of emotions and whatever comes your way. And that's the ultimate goal here. That's where healing takes place, when we are able to nurture resilience or that ability into our children. And because of some of those issues we talked about at the beginning of the webinar, all of our children would benefit from nurturing more resilience. A lot of us as adults, this is lifelong. This isn't just for childhood. We all would benefit from additional self-care. Our communities are challenged. So here's a couple of some basic responses that have really powerful impacts on your kids. When you see that they're struggling, doesn't necessarily mean they're in crisis, but you see that they're struggling. The talking, you want to check in and see if they would like to talk to you first. It's respectful. It promotes really great engagement. And then secondarily, an emotional check-in or wave. This is such a great practice, especially if talking about emotions is new in your household. You just kind of go around the room, not big conversations. You just have everyone go around and say, how are you feeling right now? Oh, I'm joyful. I'm done for the weekend. It's Friday. Oh, I'm really sad because my friend was going to come over and her parents are going out of town, so she can't come. Simple little things. You can keep the characters out, but for children who aren't used to identifying their emotions, it's skill development. And that's where all the good things start, is understanding how you feel. As adults, sometimes we have to take that to the next step and be the mirror if they don't want to talk, but we see things that are concerning. But you don't want to speak on your assumptions. You just want to provide facts. So if you know when your child is anxious, they can't sleep and they're playing video games all night, you don't go to them and say, hey, I know you're anxious. You simply state, I'm noticed, I'm telling you to go to bed and it's 11 o'clock. And you don't think I'm aware that you're still playing video games and you're not getting very much sleep. Would you like to talk about that? It's an entirely different way to bring up an opportunity to have a really good, respectful conversation. And they may say, yeah, I am feeling very anxious. And you can guide them even to the worksheet and say, well, we talked about that. Let's pull out that worksheet. What are some things that you can do when you're feeling anxious? And maybe we can time it that you do it an hour before bed. You do that and then come up with some ways that after you're done, then you're able to get yourself to a place where you can fall asleep a lot easier and have some conversations about some good recommendations there. Again, creating a soothing environment. Their soothing music, not yours, might be jazz, and you might not like jazz at all, but it's creating a soothing environment for them to help calm those emotions so that there's more emotional balance there. Lights have a huge impact, the sensory stuff, like Margaret said. Also invite to do some things with them. If walking is good for them, if yoga is good for so many of us. But don't just tell them, you know what, I think you need to go for a walk. Why don't you invite them? It's great time spent together, as well as helping to remind them. They may say, I was feeling kind of anxious earlier. And then ultimately being realistic and recognizing that you might not be able to resolve it all through your own support. We all have limits. Parents and caring adults have our plates, but there are times where we have to reach out beyond the family, beyond the relationship, and reach out to resources in the area. So I would suggest, and for the question about with a toddler, one of the resources that I am providing in what we're going to send to you afterwards is what is offered through Sesame Workplace. There are amazing resources available there. So you're going to be getting some stuff. Here is just a smattering of some great some great resources in the community to turn to when you need to go beyond yourself and get support for kids with some expertise and partnership, and to explore what's going on. Of course, if it's a crisis, you definitely need to respond accordingly and get your local resources on a list before you need them. Communities have a lot of their own powerful stuff. So definitely, keep the handy ones, keep the 988 handy. It's seen a lot more these days. Keep the Samson National Helpline invaluable. And they have a lot of your local resources in their listing, but they're available to talk. So use them if you need them, and don't hesitate. Call first, even if you're unsure, because they're there to help when you're unsure. You don't have to be 100% sure you're ready to call. Make the call.
Recognize that as the adults in the rooms, we also may need support. We may find things are triggered for us that we need support with. Our inner child may be stuck at a specific stage, age, memory, that we may need more to be that role model for our loved one. And what we are doing in seeking more is sharing with our youngsters, it is okay to ask for help. It's a huge lesson to learn, a huge lesson to teach, because many of us, no matter what we go through with our parents, put our parents on pedestals and see them in a certain light. And it's so important for them to know that, yeah, we may have strengths and resources, but we also struggle and that we can get help. And so it's okay for them to ask for help. Own our experiences, heal from our trauma, do our own work. We gift our children so much more of us. It's like the analogy, put our own oxygen masks on first and then assist putting it on the people we love. That is critical. And it is never too late to have a happy childhood. We get to recreate that in areas of our life through our own healing and our own growth. Be mindful that we are works in progress. As my sponsor says, when we're green, we're growing. When we're ripe, we're rotting. I want to stay green.
That's actually extremely cute. I love that, Margaret. So I just had put in the chat, it is 2:30. I want to be very respectful for people who have another meeting that you have to go to and you have to hop off. We will be issuing a survey as you exit. So please, I take all that seriously. If there's more questions that you have, we're going to make sure that we answer them in the email that we'll be sending out after the webinar today. Let us know of other topics that are of interest to you. We can create a webinar just like this if there's other information that's valuable to you. We want to create webinars that are of interest to you. So thank you so much for joining us today. I don't see any questions having been entered into the Q&A. But here, let me see. All of a sudden, the chat got very busy all of a sudden.
Yeah,
Yes.
people are saying thank you, which is very kind. We thank you. We thank you for your investment in learning and exploring. And we just found ourselves jazzed with this movie and wanted to explore it further. We could have probably done 6 webinars easily on this topic. So thank you for understanding all the content was our passion coming through. And that took us to the time of 2:30.
Well, and one important thing that I do want to mention is, let me do a quick, I'm going to stop sharing this and share our events because we have another movie related event coming up. So you'll see right here in the center, we're actually pulling the tweens and teens together Tuesday, September 10th at 7:30. So if you've got kids that would love to sit and talk about the movie, we've got an opportunity for just that. I'm going to include these events. We've got some other webinars that are coming up. We also, for adults that want to learn more about the impact of addiction as children and how to address those issues as adults, we do have an NACoA education discussion group once a month. It's the second Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, and we actually will be talking about double recovery, healing from addiction, as well as the family impact. And it's a beautiful way to help celebrate Recovery Month. So we've got a lot of stuff coming. We would absolutely love to see you at those events as well. And as we said, we're going to be sending all of these resources to you. You'll have a nice discussion guide coming. I'll send the events. We'll include some answers if you enter them into your survey as you leave. And we're just really grateful that you came, that you were as active in the chat as you were. It felt us to be a little bit closer during this time that we have together. And I think, so yeah, as far as Germany, thank you very, very much. We appreciate you joining us, Marianne. It's absolutely fabulous. We've received, in providing this webinar, we've had parents that have expressed gratitude. So if you are a provider, if you provide programs, if you provide treatment, this is going to be made available, both the guide as well as the recording. And it would be lovely for you to be able to share that once it's available on our website in your community. Share it with your caring adults, share it with your families. Have your own discussion opportunity with kids if you're doing children's programs. We don't get these opportunities that often, and it's such an incredible film. and it provides a beautiful landscape to have all kinds of wonderful conversations that respond to the children and all of us. And we all feel a little bit better after we've had a chance to discuss it.
And I'd love to just do a shameless plug of something else that's coming. My podcast is entering season 5. And for anyone who's looking for a podcast that speaks directly to the family experience around the disease of addiction, feel free to look it up. And I know it will be part of the resources. It is Embrace Family Recovery Podcast. And it's a chance for people to be driving or walking and in their earbuds hear stories they may relate to offer healing and strategies for how people have navigated their own journeys from partners, parents, siblings, kids, you name it. They've been guests, including wonderful experts in the field, like our good friend Jerry Moe and many others. So it's a great resource also out there for anyone who might find it beneficial.
And so with that, we're going to call it a day. Thank you so much for joining us. We wish you all a fantastic afternoon or evening, wherever you are. And we wish you a safe and wonderful Labor Day weekend. Thanks again, everyone. Bye-bye.
Take care. Thank you.